Good morning, folks. We're pleased to have you here today. I'm Representative Winter, the chairman for this committee, and again, I want to welcome you here. We're going to have four different bills today we're going to try to get through, so I just ask you to keep your testimonies to the point, and so we can get through these if possible. Also, I'd like to just remind you to keep your telephones turned off and keep your testimonies where they as short as we can. So thank you very much, and we look forward to getting something done today. Let's see, I had something else I was going to say, but now I can't remember, so which isn't unusual.
Just make a reminder, keep comments through the chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Keep your comments, address your comments to me, and then this thing probably go a little bit smoother. So first of all, we have House Bill 132 to finish up. We got through most of it the other day, but we'd have a couple of things we need to discuss. So we have Representative Smith. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you. Roll call.
Good morning. Representative Banks?
Here.
Representative Davis?
Here.
Representative Eklund?
Here.
Representative Johnson? Representative Ottman?
Here.
On Representative Johnson, what would you?
Yeah, excused.
Thank you. Representative Provenza? is
Excused.
Representative Schmidt?
Here.
Representative Strzok?
Here.
Chairman Winter?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As I said, we're going to address House Bill 132, and we have Representative Smith and representative from the Highway Department here. And I forget your name, ma'am. I apologize.
Troy McAlpine, Chairman.
Thank you. So, Representative Smith, would you like to begin?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. You should have the proposed amendment. And essentially, the first 26 lines is deleting everything that was already encompassed in the agriculture portion. And then we reduplicate the agriculture portion, and my understanding was the committee's proposal was they wanted to keep the 90-day option, and they also wanted a 1-year option. So in that, we made the 1-year option and increased, they can either do the $50 for 90 days or $200 for the 1 year. And so that ends at line 6 on page 2. So line 8, we created a whole new subsection. And just this morning, we caught one minor detail. If you would be so inclined to change, reading through the statutes, the next available letter should be a V as in Victor, and it says W. It's not really going to change anything, but if we don't want missing letters in the statute books, a V would be the most appropriate. And then lines 8 through 17, we did a lot of negotiating and back and forth to get a product that would be happy for the community, YDOT, and myself. And so one of the minor changes we made was the inches, and so it's 162 because YDOT's consistency, they go in feet and half feet. And so I think it's 13 feet 6 inches if I'm not mistaken. And then as far as the concern about the definitions that I wanted wide open for all of mankind, we narrowed it down to prefabricated buildings on line 12, panels, and trusses. And so one permit would be good for all three. So if their load is sheds one day and trusses the next, they don't have to get a separate permit. And then I also threw a bone to them and increased the fee to $400 on line 17 because I was feeling generous. So that is a summary of what we did.
Thank you. Would you care to comment?
Thank you, Chairman. We did work very well together, and the agency is just as supportive as Representative Smith's constituents and himself. We're good.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up to a little discussion if there's anybody in the audience that would like to comment on it. First of all, are there any other agencies that would care to comment? Seeing none, anybody else would like to comment on this particular thing? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one question of the
go right
folks we
ahead.
have up here now? Okay. Thanks for coming in this morning. On page 2, line 12, prefabricated buildings, can you give me a little better definition of what that would include?
Chairman, Representative. Our intent behind the prefabricated buildings is extremely straightforward. It can be a broad spectrum. It can either be a shed, it could be an oil field man camp. It is quite literally any prefabricated building, whether that's an office unit, a housing unit, a storage unit, anything that falls within those parameters will be accepted.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there any, excuse me, are there any other comments on this? Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does that bring the physical note still about where it is? With all these changes? You know, the physical note on there showing a $500,000 hit to the,
Chairman, Representative, it actually will not have as significant of an impact from what we can estimate so far because we have taken out those broad statutes and definitions, and we've narrowed down to the specific commodity, thus shortening that window of actual permits that are currently being used for that. Our estimated, like I said, it was an estimation, but it's looking like anywhere between a $400,000 and $800,000 deficit at this point. So about half of what was predicted originally.
Okay. Committee members, do you have any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. We'll work this thing out. So committee, what's your pleasure on this? Okay, the bill has been moved and seconded. Representative Ottman moved the bill and Representative Strzok second.
Whichever.
Oh, I'm sorry. Switch it around if you want to. They're in agreement, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I would like to move the amendment. Can I
Please
do
go
that
ahead.
right now? Yes. I would like to move committee, please help me describe it.
I think you can just say the amendment as presented.
That would be good. I would like to move the amendment as presented.
I'll second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded that we discuss the amendment that we have on our hands. Yes, go ahead.
would the good representative want to change that one letter to another letter? Thank you. The W to,
Yes, as a friendly amendment, that would be just great.
Thank you.
You got that, Mark?
right here. So page 2, line 8, changing that W to a V.
It's page 1.
Yes, in page 1, line 19. Or 20. Change that W to a V. Is that right?
W needs to be a V.
Does that one stay a W then?
This is a new subsection. Okay. Is everyone satisfied with the, where we're at on this amendment?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll, all in favor of the motion to approve the amendment? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign? Motion carried. So are we all done with that then? Do we have to have a roll call vote?
Are there further discussion, any further discussion amendments?
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say that it is a wonderful thing to be able to work with business people, legislature, and the offices together to make something very good and work very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. So I guess go ahead and have the roll call.
Question. Is there a call for the question?
Okay,
Question?
question's been called for. We'll have the vote now.
Representative Banks,
Aye.
we're voting on House Bill 132 with an amendment. Okay? Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Davis. Aye. Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Provenza is a no. Representative Schmidt.
Aye.
Representative Strock.
Aye.
Chairman Winter.
Aye.
Vote is 8-1, do pass as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. With that, we will move on to House Bill 153. And as I remember, the only thing we have to do on that is to bring it forward and then vote on it. Is that correct?
Have we moved it?
It probably wouldn't hurt to move it again.
Representative Eklund.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the bill.
Second.
Representative Eklund moved the bill and Representative Banks second. You have that? Okay. Representative Banks, would you kind of explain where we're at on this bill? Explain it just where we're at.
Yeah, so we're currently have it open for amendments. And I would like to, by our good treasurer that spoke to us the other day, amend on page 6, line 9. Amend that 5 to a 3, just so all the language and the numbers are matching there in that section. And so my amendment would be strike 5 and replace it with 3.
And that's where again, Representative?
On page 6, line 9.
Okay. And move or take 5 out and put what in?
3.
3. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Does everybody have that?
If there's a second. Second.
Okay, we have, it's been moved and seconded by Representative Eklund that we include this amendment. Is everybody clear on that? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So I guess we just need to have the vote, roll call vote.
There's more discussion. Further discussion,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
go ahead, Representative Eklund.
So we had testimony on this at our last meeting, and there are some fairly concerning things to me. I don't know if people are aware that we're probably $400, $500 million under every year on keeping up with our highways. The biggest problem with this I see, and it's a boon to the ag community, no doubt about it. In fact, it would help our ranch so much that I almost would declare a conflict on voting on this thing. The biggest communities hurt are small rural communities that don't have a big city in them to supplement this. Biggest one was Niobrara, and they have 42% of their vehicles that are old enough to be able to do this, and we're not gonna backfill those counties at all. And I guess I'm probably gonna vote against it because of the loss of revenue to the whole system, especially the counties, especially the littlest ones. Laramie County's probably not gonna be affected by it. My little ranch, in the scheme of things, may not affect it, but I'm almost ready to declare conflict because I looked at it, we've got 2 vehicles that wouldn't qualify for this, and we got a pile of them. And we would do it this way. We blow an engine, we just fix it. We never seem to retire any vehicles unless they get wrecked too much. So that's my opinion on the bill. I like the idea. I just don't know how we're gonna get the money back into some coffers that are really gonna need it if we take it away from them.
Thank you, Chairman, or Representative. Is there any more discussion? Representative Davis.
I have to agree with the good representative down there. You know, the previous bill, there was a 400,000 to 800,000 deficit. And, you know, then looking at this one, there's quite a bit of deficit on it also to those funds that we are already struggling. So, anyway, that's just my thought also.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Okay,
I'll call for the question.
question's been called for on House Bill 153.
We're voting on House Bill 153 with the amendment. Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
Aye.
Representative Eklund.
No.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Provenza has voted no. Representative Schmidt.
Aye.
Representative Strzok.
Aye.
Chairman Winter.
Aye.
Vote 7-2, pass with amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We'll now go to House Bill 123. Would the sponsor come forward? Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you this morning, sir?
Well, so far so good. would you go ahead and present your bill?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ag Committee. Thank you for taking the time to allow me to present House Bill 123 to you this morning, Adverse Possession Property Tax Defense. Give you a little background on the reasoning behind this piece of legislation I brought to you today for your thoughtful consideration. We ranch in the northeast corner of Wyoming and had an opportunity here a couple of years ago to be able to lease another ranch. And in the process of going around with the landowner and looking at some potential places to put some new water structures in and stuff like that to try to help do a little bit better job of scattering the livestock across this particular piece of land, I was riding with the gentleman that was going to help us potentially do this water project, and we drove up to a fence and the gate, and we had Onyx, and we're looking at this this property, and I just assumed that was the end of the property. You know, it was fenced off, the gate was chained shut. So I was looking at him, I said, well, I guess we're done here, because I didn't have a map with me. He says, oh, no. He said, this place goes on quite a bit farther than that. I'm like, really? And so I said, well, then let's go ahead and go through. The gate was not padlocked locked. It was just a chain on it with an unlocked padlock holding it together. It kind of looked like it was just enough to get most people not to get out of their vehicle to go through and look. So anyway, we go through this and we continue on. We continue on to quite a distance and come to another gate that was not padlocked. And I said, well, is this it? And he said, oh, no. He said, this property goes on quite a bit further. Well, I'm continuing to drive, and pretty quick we're getting on to the next block of land that we drop over the top of a hill and come to somebody's home. And I said, no, he said, just a little further here. And he said, this is the actual end of the property line, according to Onyx. And so that got me to thinking. I'm like, well, how in the world, what's going on here? So I went back and talked to the landowner that I was leasing the property from. I said, do you realize, I said that this, I didn't realize that this place stopped quite a bit further than what we had kind of figured when we looked at the lines originally. And he said, well, yeah, he said we kind of, we knew that some of it was not necessarily fenced into us. Well, in the little bit of investigation I did, I found out there was almost 200 acres of land that was actually in the neighbors and had been for decades. And no effort had ever been made to put anything on the property line. Well, in the process of this, the gentleman that I'm leasing this property from was getting up in his years, and I said, well, it don't matter to me. I said, whatever you want to do. I said, just, don't charge me for land that I can't actually use. I said, we'll just use those property lines, because some of it's not fenced at all. And he said, well, no. He says, Chip, he said, I would really like to, at the age that we are right now, he said, I would really like to be able to get the fences on the line. And he says, because, as my kids come in, they're not here. I don't know how much longer we're going to do this, and he said it would just be handy that right now while you're leasing it, he said, if you would just help us maybe get those lines established and get them on the line. Well, that's fine with me. I'm just a leaser. I'm not, that's not the property owner. And I said, well, if it's just whatever you want to do, however you want to pursue this. Well, in the conversation, they contacted the other landowner that had been utilizing that land. And he said, well, why don't you just lease it to me for $1 an acre? And I'm like, well, that'd be a heck of a deal. I'd like to give you $1 an acre for it if I could. But he says, no, he said, I would really like to put the fence on the line. And Wayne's, we've got it kind of established, and we've got a new lease established with this gentleman. Well, he said, he said, we've had that for a long time. He said, that's been fenced into us. He said, we just might file for adverse possession on that. And ladies and gentlemen, it put me to thinking, because immediately it put the stress of that gentleman who owns that property, clearly defined on his tax liability and his description of his deed. That's his property. He's been paying taxes on it indefinitely here since he's had it, in good faith and good time, and never delinquent on his taxes. And it called into question my thought is, well, if I've got somebody else's property, and just because they have never made an effort to try to go put it on the line, can I, according to state law? No, I can't. But here's the problem I saw, is that this gentleman that I'm leasing this property from could potentially be seeing a legal cost to defend himself from something that he shouldn't have to defend himself from. Because even if he can or can't do it, it just opens a gateway for somebody to say, well, let's just start the process. And not everybody has the money to fight it. And not everybody has the money to be able to protect themselves in this way. And with we seeing a lot of new people moving into the area and purchasing properties, and the fences are not on the line, that if they're owning those lands, even if they don't have them fenced out, that they shouldn't have to worry about somebody coming in and challenging their ability to be able to continue to own their property. let alone the idea that they would have to pay an attorney, even if it goes nowhere, which if they fight it, it wouldn't have went anywhere. But my thought was, why even open the door and allow that process to start? And make whoever that is getting ready to say, hey, maybe we'll just sue you for adverse possession, think twice when they see the statute and say, if you've been paying your taxes on it, you have no right to start. Don't even start down that road, and don't cause this other landowner an expense unnecessarily. And so that was my thought, because it threw these folks into a tailspin. They're like, can he do that? Can we cost that? Do I need to get a hold of an attorney? And I'll be quite honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, these are really decent people. And just seeing the stress of the potential of something like that starting a lawsuit, even if it went nowhere, was unnecessary in my mind. So that was the nexus of this. I said, I just want to put something in statute that says if you've been paying your taxes on your described property that the county assessor has, then you shouldn't have to worry about somebody coming in, even if it's not been fenced into your property, to have to be concerned about defending your property. You've been taxed on it. You've been paying for it. The right to use it, or at least establishing the fact that it is yours. You've been paying for it. Why should you have to face the potential challenge to being able to keep it, even if it doesn't go anywhere? And I pulled some of the statutes up. It says in Wyoming, adverse possession is the legal process that allows a person to claim ownership of a property by occupying it continuously for 10 years. Now, what do you call an occupying? If I haven't been leasing it to anybody and haven't run any of my cattle on it, and I haven't been over on it, and my hunters don't even go on it, and it's not fenced out, is it mine then? The other gentleman or operation's been utilizing your land. Have they been paying you a lease on it? And in this situation, they hadn't been. There had been timbering done on it previously, but it was well beyond the 10-year line. So the point of it was, in my mind, is why don't we just do something about stopping it to begin with? Don't even let it start down this road. And again, to my point of so many different people moving into the communities and things like that, there's a lot of folks moving into these areas with a lot of money. And there's some folks that don't have the resources. And believe it or not, agriculture is not a business to be in if you want to be flush. You'll be land wealthy, you'll be asset wealthy potentially, but as far as your ability to be able to have access to liquid cash, you're going to have to probably leverage or lean on your property to be able to fight this. And what happens if somebody shows up with an immense amount of money and says, you know what, we'll just make it difficult. May not get it, but we'll just start that road. I don't know. I'm just trying to avoid it, is my point in this. And see if we can just give some people that own ground some peace of mind of knowing that they don't have to start down a legal avenue unnecessarily. Just head it off before it begins. And so to point out this a little bit further, a person known as an adverse possessor must meet certain requirements during this time. The adverse possessor must occupy the property openly, exclusively, and continuously. The adverse possessor must not have the true owner's permission. Isn't that interesting? You've got to make sure you don't have their permission to occupy it, which in this situation, they didn't, but they were just utilizing it because, and here's another thing, in my part of the country, a lot of fences were put on places because they were convenient. You didn't build fences, in a draw because you were going to be rebuilding it every day. So two previous landowners would say, hey, you know what, put it up on top of the ridge where it'll blow open and we don't have to go up there every spring, fixing broken posts and standing up the woven wire and everything like that, and they work together. Well, those days have kind of changed because now those places of convenience, I know people in my country that'll spend a lot of money putting a fence in places that nobody in their right mind would build a fence, just to make sure that it's on the line. And so I don't want those operations and those agreements between previous landowners to open a door too for someone else to come in and say, I think that'd be good just to leave that fence where it's at. And never mind the fact that there's 200 acres of your property behind that fence. So anyway, that's the nexus of it. I would appreciate the discussion. That's what prompted it, and I would be glad to answer any of your questions if I can.
For the sponsor, Representative Eklund.
I think I'm fairly clear on the, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm fairly clear on the circumstances, and I envisioned that this was probably rough country and the fences were were placed where they were, was there any kind of a land trade that was going on? They just, yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Representative Efkin, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, there was no kind of a land trade going on. And to add irony to it, the previous leaseholder actually leased all 3 ranches through there. Well, then they turned back the one lease that we ended up with. Well, it wasn't a big deal because they were leasing everything. Well, then when we ended up leasing it, then it brought that into question. So we had to go back. And yes, sir, it is nasty country to build fence in. But we ended up getting that piece of fence built in there. The other property owner who is responsible for half that responsibility of that property line is still fighting. He said, I'm not gonna pay for no fence, that's your problem. He said, you fix it, you wanted it on the line, that's your deal. And so I don't know how that's gonna shake out, but, and another part on this, and it would be, I thought about this after, a potential amendment for you folks, if you'd be interested, is if somebody does start this process and goes after somebody, even though that they know it's their property, I think whoever went after them should have to pay for any fees or court costs or anything like that incurred by the actual landowner. If you're gonna start down this road, try to take away their property and put them in a difficult situation and create a bunch of costs on them. You do this, then that ought to be at your expense. Don't make them pay for that, especially when you find out that you shouldn't be able to do that if they've been paying their taxes, properly.
Yes. Well, thank you. Are there any other questions? I have one, I guess. Do you have any verbiage relative to that potential amendment that you're talking about?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would, let me see, I thought I wrote something down here this morning. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. This is a thought, and you guys, with all the talent and giftings when it comes to making amendments, can massage this and maybe make it work. Is it amended to say if someone starts an adverse possession on someone and causes the landowner to incur costs, the one suing for the adverse possession shall bear all legal costs incurred by the landowner.
Thank you.
Would be my suggestion. You guys can do whatever you want with that, but that's my idea, is that if you're gonna, like in this gentleman's particular situation, hey, you know what, I might just have my attorney get a hold of you and we'll just let you know we might be doing this. Well, then if he needs to respond back and they ended up having to do it and charge them legal fees, I would like to see the guy that brought it against the actual landowner have to pay for those fees, and that might also be a deterrent for these kind of actions being brought.
Could you provide that wording to our secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I would be glad to.
Okay, thank you. Does the committee have any questions or thoughts on this? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and thank you, and maybe you could stick around for a little bit.
I'd be glad to. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee, for taking the time to hear this. Appreciate your time.
Do we have any people in the audience who would like to testify on this? Mr. Moline.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. A little unusual for me today. I have a lot of my members in the audience that I typically don't have. So anyway, but I was sitting in support of this bill. The situation described by the good speaker is not unusual. Yeah, I'll use one of my members as an example. When we all had the same neighbors for decades, it wasn't a problem. But then when this land starts changing hands, before it changed hands, one member went out and made sure the fences in some of the corners were on the right line, just for the reasons given by the speaker. So I think it's more common across the state. Back when neighbors got along, it wasn't a big deal. But then when property starts changing hands, it does become a big deal. As the speaker said, fences were put where it was easiest, but now it's probably a better idea to actually put them on the line. But to help alleviate some of these situations, I think this is a great bill, great start, and it would support the amendment as proposed by the speaker. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would take any questions you or the committee may have for me.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Moline? Seeing none? Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Magagna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockbrokers Association. We support this legislation for the reasons that the bringer has presented to you. I just have one thought for your consideration. While our county assessors do an outstanding job, there can be errors. And I may be paying taxes on a piece of land that I don't own. I wonder if it might be helpful to this on line 8 after lands to insert consistent with the recorded title to the land. So that if the title to the land is in a person's name, even if the assessor through some error hadn't assessed them, and I'm aware of one scenario where this has occurred, it didn't result in any problems, but the assessor schedules of lands are not always totally correct, and it seems like the recorded title should be the determining factor. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Magagna? Might have him repeat that again. Okay. Could you repeat that proposed amendment?
Mr. Chairman, would be on line 8 after lands, insert consistent with the recorded title to the well, title, I don't think you need to say anymore, consistent with the recorded title. And Mr. Chairman, as I read this again, excuse me, but perhaps that phrase would better be inserted after hereditaments, so that it would apply to the entire, not just to the land, but to anything else that, although land would be the only thing that would have recorded title, I believe. So I'm a little uncertain is the best place to insert that, but I think if you insert it after lands would be adequate.
Representative Eklund.
Mr. Magagna, what are hereditaments? It's not part of my vocabulary. Can you help me with that? Mr. Chairman, I have a vague concept of it, but I would prefer to defer to someone else to actually explain that to you well. It's not coming to me right now.
Is there anyone in the audience that knows what that means?
I think we're all in that boat.
Okay, well, I guess we'll figure it out. But anyone have any questions on the proposed amendment? Do you have that verbiage? You do, okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Magagna.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any other public testimony?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
a hereditament is it's any kind of property that can be inherited. Can either be land or actually can be intangible also.
thank you. Did you get that, Mr. Magagna? What the definition? Okay.
Based on now a clear definition, I would recommend that you choose to apply the amendment you applied at the end of the word hereditary.
Thank you. Any more questions? Well, see, I guess we need to, is there any other testimony out there? Seeing none, I guess we'll leave it up to the committee. What's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Motion been made and seconded to move the bill. Do you have any? All in favor? No. You didn't get that? Representative Banks made the motion, and Representative Ottman seconded. Representative Banks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with following the testimony we heard, I'd like to move that we add language on page 8 after the word hereditaments.
Page 2.
Oh, page 2, line 8, excuse me. And we insert consistent with the recorded title.
Do you have that? Okay. Probably, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, second that motion.
So we have two amendments?
We'll have another one after.
Okay, well, it's been Representative Wattman, second.
That was on the bill. We're on the First Amendment. First Amendment, just, if there's no discussion. Those in favor?
Okay. So any more discussion on this amendment? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So do we have a motion on the floor for the other amendment? Representative Eklund.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask for our secretary to read that suggestion. Well, I'm going to move that. We'll start with that. I'll move a second amendment, and the secretary has it if there's a second.
Do we have a second? Representative Ottman seconded. Could you read it for us?
I will. This is the amendment from Chairman or Speaker Nyman. It states, if someone starts an adverse possession on someone and causes the landowner to incur cost, the one suing for the adverse possession shall bear all legal costs incurred by the landowner.
Everybody clear on that? Okay. All those in favor?
Discussion.
Okay, discussion. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only hesitancy with this is that I'm not sure, one, where we're putting it exactly, and if it makes sense to put it there. There might be different portion of statute where we handle land dispute situations other than this adverse, so I'd hate to put it somewhere where lawyers and folks are looking at this, trying to make determinations about whether, or the courts, really, I'm thinking about the courts, in making determinations about who pays what, and I'm not 100% certain that this is where it goes. I would support the concept of the amendment but I'd like some time to look at, is this the place that makes sense? And again, I'm not sure, are we making subparagraph C? I'm not sure I'm clear 100% on what this is doing, and I'd hate to maybe mess up the bill or the statutes when we could put it somewhere that flows easier.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, Representative Eklund.
Also in that discussion, I'm not sure either, but I think I'm in favor of this amendment, but I'm not sure whether it'd be a C, but I think it could just be added in this. I'm on page 2, paragraph B that we're changing, just add it to that paragraph, but we have an attorney in the House, so maybe they'd have an opinion on where we ought to place it.
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't tell you right now where the best spot for that to go would be, in my estimation. You could either, you could do a concept amendment and have LSO look at that, but we don't have enough information with this bill draft.
Okay, thank you. So what's yes, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you read that language just one more time? So I catch the first portion and then my brain gets jumbled up on the second portion.
I'd be glad to. If someone starts an adverse possession on someone and causes the landowner to incur cost, The one suing for adverse possession shall bear all legal costs incurred by the landowner.
Mr. Chairman, I guess part of my concern with the language was what the bringer mentioned was if they knowingly are trying to adverse land that they know isn't theirs, right? That it's they know that they've had it, but it's not their land. And so I don't want to stifle anyone from trying to go into litigation over what they believe is actually something that should be contested and force the other party to pay for it, not if they're not sure. People might want to go to litigation to settle the land disagreement. And if you force it, then we're forcing them to pay for any legal costs. And my understanding from the bringer was that wasn't necessarily the intent.
Mr. Speaker.
If I may. Good conversation, and thank you, Representative. May I, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Chairman, may I address a good representative?
Right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Provenza, good catch. Just thinking out there while you're discussing this, I would almost want to add a little bit of an amendment on there, say that if after contacting or establishing property line through, like what Mr. McGagna shared, through proper, how would you say it? Land description, after knowingly, getting the actual description of property, make them go and find the property lines. If you knowingly have that information and you knowingly still try to do this, then yes, then you should be the one that's gonna have to bear any cost like that. I think there should be some way of forcing these folks to go and find out what the actual fence line is and know where it's at. And they can easily do that. They can go to the description in the land office and the assessor's office. They have that description. And if you still pursue this, then, at this point, the other landowner probably hasn't been contacted. And if you're gonna start that action, then you're responsible. If you're gonna cause them this heartache and grief and cost, knowing full well where the property line is, then yes, then I think you should bear any cost that they would have to be incurred in this situation.
Yes, thank you. Representative Eklund.
Mr. Chairman. So I think we might end up with more of a conceptual amendment. And and all of this makes sense. It's part of what we hadn't thought through very well in making amendments this quick. But anyway, I would like to amend the amendment to say that this is a conceptual amendment that will need the work of some attorneys because there are other problems. If the person suing with adverse action wins the thing, they shouldn't have to pay for the other person's cost. If he's the one that's in the wrong, and that will be determined probably by the action. So I'd like to amend it to say that this will be a conceptual amendment with these provisions in it. Our attorney wasn't positive on where we would even place it, so we're gonna have a little trouble probably doing that. So if there's a second to the amended amendment.
Okay. That was a motion?
Representative Davis has a comment.
Okay,
Yeah, I moved to amend it, I think.
okay, so yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the essence of time and everything like that, could that come in as a committee of the whole amendment if this should go forth, instead of sitting here struggling and trying to come up with the verbiage, give us some time to do it then? Pass the bill with the amendment that is already on there and look at this in the committee of the whole.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That'd be my recommendation. I don't see any problem of this amendment passing, so I don't think it needs the committee's name on it to pass. So I think we should work with the bringer and LSO and figure out what that can look like and talk about it upstairs.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would, I'd like to remove my motion for this amendment, if the second's agreeable.
The motion's been removed, and everybody's in agreement, so I guess we just go ahead and work, have a vote on the bill.
Question. No. I'm not, I'm asking a question.
You need somebody from.
I can't ask for the question. So as I understand it, we're voting on House Bill 123 with the amendment on page 2, line 8, after this long word, hereditaments, whatever. We're going to include, consistent with the recorded title, that would be subject of the adverse possession claim. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yes.
Discussion on the bill.
Yes, Representative Davis. Oh, okay, thank you. The question's been called for. I guess we need a roll call.
Voting on House Bill 123 with the amendment, Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Davis. Aye. Representative Eklund,
Aye.
Representative Johnson,
Aye.
Representative Ottman,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
Aye.
Representative Schmidt,
Aye.
Representative Strzok,
Aye.
Chairman Winter.
Aye,
Do pass, vote is 9-0, do pass with the amendment.
well, thank you. We're going to move to House Bill 186, and we're gonna have to wait a second for the sponsor to show up.
Mr. Chairman, while we have a minute.
Yes, go ahead.
Who's gonna work with the attorneys for the committee of the whole amendment? The guy who brought this thing is pretty busy. I don't know if he wants to do it, but we could have a committee. I would be willing to work on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Did you talk to him?
Yeah, he's coming. He just had to fill out his vote.
Okay. We'll pause for a few moments here until our sponsor appears.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, I'm next door on revenue working on a bill, so let me get my bill out here and I will walk through it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Ag Committee. I'm here to present to you House Bill 186, titled Bear Coupons, Game and Fish. I believe you guys can all read. I'm not going to walk through everything. I am going to tell you the rationale behind this. I am very frustrated with the fact that we have recovered the grizzly bear. It's met recovery goals since 2000. And I'm tired of the courts interfering with our state's ability to manage, and I guess I'm trying to make a statement here. And it mirrors the statement that we made when we were fighting on the wolf issue. Those of you that weren't here, we were fighting for the dual status, and one of the things that we did was they kept doing the same thing. The courts kept interfering and kept blocking it. And we had a legislator to actually introduce legislation and said, we're gonna hunt them. And so I'm kind of following down that same path. I believe that the state is sovereign. I believe that the species has recovered. And I think just as we made the argument with the wolves, that we're dispersing away from the recovered population, we've seen the desire of the former individual that headed up the recovery program of the grizzly bear. They are wanting to expand that area now to go all the way down to Kemmer, over to Rock Springs, and then all the way to the east, headed over to the Bighorns. It's a substantial expansion of our recovery efforts, and we've never agreed to that. And we wouldn't. It puts too many of the citizens at risk. It puts bears in conflict with existing practices, just like we had with the wolves. And the most important thing that I think needs to be understood, the bears that are moving to the south or to the east are no longer contributing to the recovery of the grizzly bear population. They are, we know, and the Game and Fish can confirm it, but we know that the habits of bears, they will get into conflict sooner or later. And unfortunately, it's not like some of the other endangered species that we've had to deal with in the past. This is a species that can be, and at times is lethal. When people come into contact with grizzly bears, it usually doesn't end well for either one. And that's really kind of the basis for this. But what I did, I looked at the history, and historically, when you purchased an elk tag in Wyoming, it came with a coupon up until 1987. And it was restricted to black bear. I've intentionally written this to where that coupon would be available for any bear outside the grizzly bear recovery area. And I done that with a specific purpose. I've had some people criticize that we're giving away money because it's licenses we're not selling. I would argue that sportsmen have already contributed in excess, I think it's over $60 million now that we've spent in recovering grizzly bears. I'm very proud of the fact we did it. In fact, when I was representing a sportsman's group in the state, we actually fought against some that wanted to quit putting those dollars towards grizzly bear recovery. The reason we fought against that was because we saw the importance of the state being able to maintain control of the data. And that's what our dollars have done. It's allowed us to go out and collect the data to demonstrate that the bears are recovered, in fact. And that the mischief that's been brought in the courts, in my opinion, is simply just to continue making us spend money and energy on a recovered population that is no longer necessary or warranted. So with that, if you would like, I can walk through it, but there's some reasons, Mr. Chairman, why you'll see, it was rather specific on page 3, line 18. I say each resident elk license may have an additional coupon attached as provided in subsection D of this section. The reason why I've not offered this to non-residents, I believe we're safe as a state to say we can hunt bears. I am concerned that if we let non-residents come in our state and harvest a bear that's under federal protection, that those individuals that participated in that hunt, that in fact, if we're doing it, it's because it's sanctioned by the state of Wyoming, they wouldn't have the protections and they could be in fact in violation of the Lacey Act. And until such time that the bears are actually removed from federal protection, that would remain in place. So that is the reason and rationale behind us not extending this to non-residents. Non-residents have helped us recover grizzly bears just as much as the residents. I just think it would be irresponsible for us to put them in a situation where they could be facing federal penalties for participating in what I'm gonna call a legally sanctioned hunt. And like I said, this is just putting the coupon back on. I've had some people express concern about black bears and the potential it would have to impact them. And all I can say is I know we brought it to the attention of the Game and Fish Department. There's an outfitter that was a good friend of mine that since passed away from Teton County. But he and I both advocated for increased harvest. We have quotas that are in place right now. And typically, what we believe is happening in the Wyoming range are deer herds not recovering. Sportsmen have been very patient, but we are frustrated that we believe the black bears are having a substantial impact on mule deer population, specifically in that area. And that's one reason why I would like to see black bears also hunted pretty aggressively, mainly because we would like to see if in fact our mule deer population will respond to added pressure. We supposed, and this was more on the basis of the outfitter, and I don't know if I can mention names in here, I think I can, but I don't, where he's passed, I don't think it's appropriate. I'll just say that he testified that what we were seeing is the younger bears are the first to come out of hibernation, and consequently, because they were the first to come out, the majority of the harvest was borne by those bears. And it was our belief that the older bears that are coming out of hibernation later are the ones that are probably having a more direct impact on our mule deer fawns. They are coming out, a lot of them after the quota's been met. And to me, that's because the quota's probably a little too low, should be a little higher. This would give us an opportunity to see that. I don't believe this is gonna cause anything to be under threat of over harvest. I think we've got plenty of opportunity. Most guys that are gonna be elk hunting with an attached coupon like this, it's gonna be incidental take. They're not gonna be out targeting bears, which means if they happen on one while they're out elk hunting, they'll take advantage of the coupon. There may be some that may use that to target bears, but that is the intent. We would like to see maybe some relief given the mule deer in the Wyoming range to allow for a more rapid recovery of our mule deer population that has been struggling really since 1992. And it's just not bouncing back like it used to. And it's my belief that that is largely due to the fact that we have a very large population of black bears that once they learn a way to hunt, they're very efficient predators. And that's my concern, is the older bears are coming out and they're hammering our fawns. So with that, I guess if there's any questions, Mr. Chairman, specific to the bill, I guess I can say it does go back. There is a fiscal note, it says 26, it's 112,000. Then that's double in 27. And then it's back to 112 again in 28. But like I said, to me, this is not a true loss. To me, this is a repayment to the sportsmen that helped recover the grizzly bear, and it's to send a statement that I believe that we are in a sovereign state and that we have the ability to implement a hunting season without their approval. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd take any questions of the committee.
Yes, thank you for your testimony. Does the committee have any questions for Mr. Wharf? Representative Davis.
Oh. Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
so,
Representative Beckley.
welcome back to the Ag Committee. Representative Wharf was once on our committee, so this is a little different than what we're used to, this bear bill. But it applies to agriculture seriously to the west side. Could you refresh us quickly on the Lacey Act?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and former chairman, he was my chairman.
Go ahead.
But yes, basically the Lacey Act says that if you take and commit a wildlife violation and you cross state lines, it makes it a federal crime with added penalties. And I can't remember for sure, but I believe that it probably has felony implications. It's a serious thing. It really is kind of the third rail I would like to not touch. And that's why I requested that we not offer this currently to non-resident hunters.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My dear friend, Bob Borf. When I'm out in the field, I'm looking at scat, particularly in the northwest part of the state. You can tell black bear scat in part because it's full of berries. And grizzly bear scat has hair in it. So I'm a little confused because black bears mainly eat vegetation. There's not really any evidence that they're eating mule deer. I think there were 32 mortalities attributed to black bears, which is 5.7%. So I'm curious what data you have that tells me that our mule deer population is being decimated by black bears.
Mr. Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Provenza. I appreciate you asking that question because I can't answer that. There is a professor, he may be retired now, his name was Hal Black, but he did tremendous research down in the Book Cliffs, down in kind of central Utah. It's an area that's pretty, I think, comparable or similar to what we have in the Wyoming range. It was an area that at one time had a pretty prolific mule deer population. And he was able to document that they were having population-wide impacts. And all I can say is Google it, it's Hal Black and black bears, and you'll find the research. It was very conclusive. And the one thing that I will point out, Mr. Chairman, is, bears are omnivores. They will eat grasses, they will eat berries, but they eat meat. And that includes black bears. And like I said, it's a learned behavior. Once they learn to do something, they're very good at what they do. And the problem is, and I've asked this question to the Game and Fish Department when we've had these discussions, and that is, since there's not a really large abundance of berries in the Wyoming range, what is sustaining this large population of black bears? And the only conclusion we can come up with is that they are supplementing their diet with a lot of mule deer fawns.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wharf, how did mule deer exist before we did anything with bears? There used to be lots more bears, and we had lots more mule deer. And then we had things like, people moving into areas where there's habitat. We have severe drought. We have extreme climate issues. I mean, the snow the other year is really what happened. I think we lost 80%. I'm sure Game and Fish has numbers. I mean, those are things that hurt our mule deer population. So I just, as a scientist, I can't understand how we take a variable when we have all these other things that are harming our mule deer and saying, well, I just know that it's black bear. Do you attribute any of the loss to that we don't have the same habitat, that their food is going away, that we have drought and the extreme weather that decimated our population?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Provenza, thank you again. It's a good discussion, and I can tell you that without a doubt, the winter had an impact on our mule deer herds. But I can tell you they're not recovering. 1992 is a long time ago. We've had droughts before, we've had hard winters before, they've always recovered. One thing that has changed, prior to this, like I said, up to 1987, if you bought an elk tag, it came with a black bear tag. And I don't know what the level of harvest was at that time, but I know up until 1977, black bears were actually classified as predators. You could kill them on sight. So without a doubt, the numbers have increased, and we have changed. We've changed the environment in which mule deer live. We've had some developments. There's no doubt that we've been fortunate, as most western states have had a lot of fracturing of mule deer habitat. We've severed a lot of the migration corridors. We're lucky in Wyoming that we still have a lot of migration corridors that are intact. So I would, I guess, counter that I didn't say all the mortality is attributed to bears, but I will say there's a higher mortality, I believe, that should be attributed to bears that's not currently being addressed, mainly because of how we've changed that management structure. We used to be able to kill them as predators. They could be killed on site, no license required. We started doing the coupon attack to the elk license. Like I said, that was last done in 1987. But I would argue that our Game and Fish Department is very good at what they do. They're good wildlife managers. This isn't a criticism of them, but I believe they've been put under pressure to manage for a higher population densities than what would have naturally occurred prior to European settlement. And so I would argue that we have a higher density of bears in a confined area. That's one of the problems with the grizzly bears. We're trying to keep them in an area. We added wolves to that, and it's forcing the females with cubs are being forced out because of all the competition that's going on between the predators that are in that ecosystem, and they're all confined to one geographical area, and it's not healthy for them. That's why we need to get them delisted so they can be managed.
Thank you. Representative Banks.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Oh, I absolutely agree with you on the grizzly bear thing. I mean, they're the worst managed species I think we've ever seen in the United States. And it's, I mean, the people who are bear lovers don't love moose or elk, I mean, because they love them at the detriment of the rest of the game species in Wyoming. And it's far past the time that we have population control. My question out of curiosity is why go this route instead of do like over-the-counter tags like we currently have with the black bears?
Mr. Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Banks. The main reason why I wanted to do this is I wanted to go back to the old method because I do think we're currently too restrictive on it. If we were forced to just buy licenses, I think you run the risk. Number one, I don't know how many grizzly bear licenses the department would feel comfortable issuing because they probably have no idea how many grizzly bears are outside the recovery area. They might have an idea. But as far as the harvest, I'm not worried about the harvest. And one thing that I didn't put in this bill that I want to make it clear, I don't want this to go on in perpetuity. I didn't put any type of a cap on when we should stop doing this. But, you know, my whole intent of bringing this bill forward was to get grizzly bears delisted. Unfortunately, just before the last administration left, they made the decision that they weren't going to delist them. I know that there's a lot of moving parts right now. We've got a new administration, and I know that our U.S. Representative Hageman is working very hard to get bears delisted. I would urge the committee to move this bill forward if for no other reason than to let them know that we're serious about managing grizzly bears, and that if they don't let our Game and Fish Department do it, that the state will do it. And so that's really the message that I want to send. And I do think, you know, I've had conversations with our governor, and I believe we saw with COVID-19, I think our governor has the ability to declare grizzly bears a threat. to our human health and safety. He has full authority to do that. And I think under that provision, I think our governor could actually say, because they are a threat, that we can, in fact, implement this. And like I said, Mr. Chairman, the whole purpose of this, Representative Banks, is to put pressure on all the bears. And I didn't want to specify grizzly bears because I know there is at times confusion where somebody might think they're shooting a black bear or a grizzly bear and they inadvertently kill the other species. It happens. And with some education and training, you could avoid that. But that was the other reason why I just wanted to put the coupon on and let the bears be harvested wherever they are, wherever they become encountered by people.
Okay, thank you. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of agree with Representative Banks. If they went over the counter, we probably wouldn't have that deficit in the revenue side to the game and fish, you know? We could still be generating them tags while accomplishing your issue here. But I have a question back. What about the, chronic wasting disease, lions, things like that? I mean, you're identifying only one particular, the bear. But there's more to that ecosystem than just bears, Coyotes, extremely hard on fawning. If you had a chance to look at the predator budget this year, it's all based on fawning areas and coyotes. So I think there's more to what you're saying, but I don't think it's just a bear issue.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, I've never said this is just a bear issue, but you pointed out the fact that we do have a very active predator management that is specifically targeting mule deer fawning areas. They are only removing coyotes. They are not attacking any other trophy game animals such as mountain lion or black bear or grizzly bears. So that's why, this bill is specifically written the way it is. I think the other aspects are being managed as best we can. And CWD, that's a whole different animal. I think there's still an awful lot of unknowns on that. From what I recall, as a biologist, when I was looking at that information, mule deer were more susceptible to CWD than elk appeared to be, and I believe that's still tracking. But it still doesn't address the fact that I think under our current management structure, we have built an overabundance of bears, whether they're black bears or grizzly bears moving outside the recovery area. And as far as charging, I believe the 60 million plus that we've spent on recovery is sufficient to warrant us allowing anybody buying an elk tag, if they come across the bear, to harvest it. I don't think, I guess this is my way of acknowledging the role that sportsmen have played in the recovery of grizzly bears. And I think it's us paying back those that have compromised on some of their wishes. Grizzly bear listing was foisted on us. We've tried and tried now for 20 years to get them managed under our authority, and it's been blocked. And I think this is, Mr. Chairman, an opportunity for us to pay back those that have continued to support grizzly bear management funded by our sportsmen's dollars in Wyoming. That's why I don't feel like it's a problem to give them some free bear tags.
Representative Ecton.
Yeah, Representative Wharf, you mentioned the wolf legislation in which the state did its best to take that over. It's been the wolf recovery deal has been a constantly evolving deal, just steady and constant. And I think you're right. I think by passing legislation and forcing the state onto the federal government, that may be a good way to do it. Can you explain briefly, might be hard to do, how that worked with the wolves legislation and the combination of things to get the job done?
Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund. I believe that that really did push them over, because those of you that maybe you don't remember, but they really were trying to pit Idaho and Montana against Wyoming. They basically said, we're going to allow them to delist and we're going to leave Wyoming dangling out here on the line. And we said, have at it, because we were not going to walk away from our dual status management plan. And I believe if you could ask the states of Idaho and Montana, I think they regret that they didn't try to delist under a similar fashion. We've been in a far better position, I believe, having fought for the wolf management plan that we have today with the dual status. It recognized a lot of the same arguments that I'm making with grizzly bears. We knew there, if you remember, there was one wolf that got over into Sheridan and one night killed 90 head of sheep. That's one producer that lost 90 head of sheep. That's a big impact in our ag community. And grizzly bears in general have the same problem. Grizzly bears, and you'll find when the director comes up for the Game and Fish, I would ask you to request how many bears were removed through agency action. A lot of that agency action was largely grizzly bears killing cattle. So we're dealing with a different animal, but that's it. But in answer to your question, I'm sorry, I got lost in the weeds, but I believe that it put pressure on the department or on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when we said we're going to hunt them. I remember the representative that brought the bill said, one of the feds said, well, you can't do that. And his response was, well, we're just going to kill the Wyoming wolves. You can keep the federal wolves. And the Fish and Wildlife Service guy kind of rocked back on his heels because he knew that that's the reality. States have full authority over wildlife management, and I think we need to assert that. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be around if you have more questions.
Thank you. Would the Game and Fish Department care to come forward? Welcome, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Oh. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Doug Brimmeyer, Deputy Director with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And today I have Chief Game Warden Dan Smith with me to also answer questions and talk through this bill. We appreciate the sponsor coming up and giving an overview of the background on the bill, and we couldn't agree more with him that grizzly bear populations are recovered. As he mentioned, it's a big part of our budget. We spend a lot of money managing grizzly bears and collecting data on them. We think that's a real benefit for the state of Wyoming to have that data set. It lends a lot of credence to what we're saying. We're very sensitive to conflict. And last year we removed 42 bears, grizzly bears, and a total of those, 31 of those were outside of the designated monitoring areas. So it shows that they're expanding out as the representative mentioned. The bears are expanding. However, we believe there is a lot better way to approach delisting of grizzly bears. And our staff have been working, as you know, there's been legal actions that we've engaged in to try and get the bears delisted. We're engaged with our federal delegation, and we believe we've got some progress that we can look forward to being made with the new administration. And we just believe that's a little better approach to take. And what Dan and I will do is kind of go through some of the issues within the agency, and maybe you can see kind of, there's been some questions about licenses and harvest and that sort of thing. So we all know that bear hunting is very popular in Wyoming. In the 1980s, we were harvesting around 200 bears a year, and that was when it was a pretty unlimited tag abundance. So more recently, we've got about 5,000 people that are participating in these bear hunts. And those licenses are available, unlimited, over the counter. The agency has a management plan that we believe is based on science, that regulates the numbers of the length of the season when the harvest quotas are met. So bear populations, black bears in particular, they don't have a real high fecundity. So we're trying to maintain a limited harvest on them and maintain opportunity. And so when a certain level of bear harvest is reached on the females, we try to shut that season down. If the female harvest is not reached, that quota, then that bear season stays open. You know, and last year we harvested 660 bears. And you can see that if you looked at the trend over time, it keeps incrementally going up. And the agency has an Administrative Procedures Act process that we're following when we look at a lot of our regulations and rulemaking. And so every 3 years, we're evaluating the quotas, the numbers of females that are being harvested, and the participation by hunters. And so of those 600 bears that are harvested, 75% of that is by resident hunters. And so we're trying to balance the opportunity for people when they're out in the field. That's 660, the majority of that harvest is in the spring. It's really popular. People are over winter, they want to get out, and so they get out on those spring hunts. And so a high percentage of our harvest occurs in the spring. And so with the harvest that we saw last year, the 5,000 hunters, we raise about $300,000 a year on license fees. And again, those licenses are available over the counter. They're not limited in number, and we regulate that season by the harvest levels that we see in those areas. This bill, and I'm gonna let Dan talk in just a minute, but this bill would change would have a reduction in our revenue. It also increase the law enforcement requirement that we have. And we have some cleanup that we need to do with this, and Dan can touch on that. We just believe that there's plenty of opportunity for people to participate in the hunt. Every 3 years, we're evaluating the quotas, the numbers of females getting harvested, and do we need to adjust things accordingly. As far as the Wyoming range, Representative Provenza mentioned that we've had a study there for from 2015 to 2022, and we've monitored the outcome of 558 fawns, mule deer fawns. And yes, bears eat whatever they can find, and they're good at things, and there are some that do learn to predate on our game species. But in this case, we had, out of 558 fawns, we documented 173 mortality events during that spring 3-week time period, starting in late May. We're following those fawns for the first neonatal period, which is kind of their really young time when they can't get away from stuff. And we had 173 mortalities out of those 558 mule deer that we followed around. And 32 of those, or as the representative mentioned, 5.7% of that mortality was attributed to bears. Otherwise, when we were going out to look at where these fawns were, so we're catching them within a couple of days of when they're born. And this is through the university collaboration we have with Dr. Kevin Monteith and our folks in that part of the state. We're going in on the ground as soon as we have a signal on that transmitter. And we're looking at them, we're assessing the scene. And a lot of those animals, those fawns, are left intact on the ground when we're getting to them because we're getting there early enough. And so what we found was that 32 of those fawns were attributed to black bears. And with that, I think I'm going to let Dan kind of cover a few things, and then we'll stand for questions if you're okay with that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Again, my name is Dan Smith. I'm the Chief Game Warden and the Chief of the Wildlife Division for the Game and Fish Department. I tried to dig into the weeds a little bit more to see how it would impact the department, and I'll just share some thoughts with you. Overall, fiscally, like Doug said, in 2024, we sold black bear licenses to a total of $286,340. If every elk license has a bear tag on it, we would assume that there would be a reduction on the number of tags we would sell over the counter. As Doug mentioned, there's already unlimited number of tags, so anybody that wants to hunt black bears can can buy a tag now because it's based on a quota system, not a limited number of tags. Another fiscal impact of the department could be that a cow-calf elk license, the bill states any resident elk license, so a cow-calf elk license is actually $4 cheaper than buying a black bear license. So you could see people switching, if they wanted to hunt just black bears, you could do it cheaper by just buying a cow-calf elk license. And in some areas, we have unlimited cow-calf elk licenses, so you could buy an unlimited number at a cheaper rate. There is a financial loss, based on 2018 data when we did sell grizzly bear licenses. We sold 3 non-resident licenses at just over $6,000 a piece for a total of just over $18,000, and 9 resident grizzly tags at $607 a piece for $5,463. So when they do get delisted, and I expect that at some point they will be delisted, there would be an opportunity to sell grizzly bear licenses and have some revenue from that. Overall general impacts to the department, as I interpret the bill, and as I read this, it adds a bear coupon to every elk license, but there's no mention in the bill changing the commission authority to set limitations on the number of bears harvested. So similar to buying a tag over the counter, they still can only harvest a limited number of bears. And so even adding a tag to every elk license, it doesn't change the commission's authority as written to limit the number of bears that would be harvested. So what you would have is an increased number of hunters in the field with the ability to take a bear, but all the commission regulations referring to the number of bears that could be harvested would stay the same. So one of the impacts to the department would be that we would need to go into Chapter 3, the commission regulation that affects bears, and change some of the wording there to make sure that it encompasses these coupons as well, requiring those hunters to still check their bear in when it's harvested, making sure a season is still open, limitations on the timing of when those bear coupons would be valid. In the statute or in the bill that's proposed, it says why they're authorized during the time that I want to read it correctly out of here. In an area where a license would be authorized to take an elk as designated by the elk license. So as I interpret that, that would mean that they could only hunt a bear during their listed elk season. And the commission would need to clarify whether after you harvest an elk, can you still hunt a bear during the rest of the season? So there'd be some clarification there. I did want to circle back to grizzly bears. As you all are aware, they're not delisted yet, so they're still federally protected on the Endangered Species Act. And while this bill would make it legal in Wyoming to harvest a bear, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would still be able to prosecute you for taking a bear under the Endangered Species Act. In addition to, if you take it across state lines, as the representative said, then it would be a Lacey Act violation. But this bill could potentially set up a Wyoming hunter to be prosecuted federally for taking a grizzly bear. As you know, we're trying to work on other methods to get grizzly bears delisted. This bill may create a mixed message on whether or not Wyoming could take over management of bears. If we're going to try to hunt them while they're still on the endangered species list, are we really able to? The interpretation may be that we may not be able to manage them when they're off the endangered species list. As far as the elk coupon, there would be some, or for the bear coupon on an elk license, there would be some changes needed that we would have to do. Elk license would need to have 3 coupons on it now instead of 2. It would need an elk carcass coupon, a bear carcass coupon, and a landowner coupon. So there would be some redoing of the licensing there. As already mentioned, full price licenses, a hunter can have up to 3 licenses. So if a resident hunter had 3 elk licenses, he could potentially have 3 bear tags. In addition to reduced price licenses, which are in some areas unlimited, you could basically have an unlimited number of bear tags. But again, based on how it's written right now, I believe the quota would still apply. So no additional bears would actually be harvested on the ground, just a lot more people would have a license in their pocket to take a bear. So harvest success for guys who are actually out bear hunting that purchase a bear license, their harvest success would probably go down because the number of hunters hunting bears would go way up. If you're hunting an elk and you can just take a bear while you're hunting elk, that would be different than a guy that's out there potentially just trying to hunt bears. Under the black bear, in 2024, there was 4,767 resident elk hunters that also purchased a black bear license. There were, so there would be a revenue loss there because they would not be purchasing that bear license. In 2024, just back to the quota, there was, the female mortality quota in 2024 was 131. We killed a total of 600 and some bears, but the female quota was 131. And again, as I interpret this, that would not change based on this bill. Hunters would still be required to register their bears under Commission Regulation Chapter 3. I would offer an amendment that on page 4, lines 21 to 23, the bill states, as soon as practicable, notify the Game and Fish Commission of the time, place, and manner and taking of the bear. I would offer that that text be deleted and replaced with register the harvested black bear per commission regulation. One other amendment that I would propose for your consideration is that on page 4, line 12, we have it listed as brown or black bear or grizzly bear. I would delete brown or. In Wyoming, brown bear and grizzly bear is basically the same species, and so it's a little bit duplicative. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions? Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we talk about a lot about the wildlife. How is this affecting anyone with livestock? You know, this, the bear and this whole discussion. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman Winters and Representative Strzok. So we are very sensitive to when landowners have damage, and our folks on the ground are confirming when there are losses from bears. And so generally we're paying for damage from bears. And so last year we paid $700,000 for grizzly bears to mostly producers, and then also $48,000 in black bear damage in FY23. So we remove specific animals, as I mentioned earlier. We're evaluating those animals and depending on where they're at in the ecosystem, so if you will, so there's a recovery zone. We haven't really had any problems or remove bears there that we haven't been able to address, but outside of that recovery zone, I mentioned that we removed 38 bears, I believe it was, and 38 that were outside the recovery zone, grizzly bears.
Yeah, yes, Representative Strzok.
Thank you. So where does that money that you pay come from? Like when you're paid for the damage?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Representative, that all damage payments come from licensed dollars. So as we sell hunting and fishing licenses, that money is also used to pay damage.
Okay, so is that put in, sorry, follow.
Go ahead.
So is that put into the whole thing here when you have your fiscal note and you're gonna lose money, but is that put in there, if you're not having to pay back those damages? I mean, are we saving some money?
Mr. Chairman?
Or Mr. Smith.
Representative, we would be unable to determine that until it actually happened, because we don't know what the damage would look like. In theory, if more bears were killed, maybe there'd be less damage, but it may be that we don't address the actual bears that are causing the damage through hunting. So it's hard to determine.
Thank you. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my understanding is that Wyoming did bear coupons, and I'm not aware of the history of that. And so I'm wondering if you could walk me through when Wyoming included bear coupons with elk licenses, and then why we ended that program and what the impact was to our populations.
Mr. Chairman? Representative, I'll take a shot at it. And initially, I don't know that there wasn't the demand for it. And so in 1988 was the first year that we stopped having them tied together. I think there was enough demand to hunt bears separately that we could separate that off and sell it as a different license.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
and if I could add, Representative Provenza, so also during that time, we were looking at the biology of the bears and we were getting a little bit, I guess, watching how these female bears, when they would come out of the den a little bit later, they're more vulnerable. And under our regulation, when a bear has a cub at side, they're not, they're not allowed to be hunted by our regulation. And so we started trying to find a way that we could implement closing dates and things that would help eliminate or reduce that vulnerability, especially on those reproducing bears.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions from the committee? Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Director. Can you refresh my memory, how many bear licenses you said you guys sold annually? I didn't write it down.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Representative Schmidt, so last year we were just under 5,000, it's 4,900, I believe.
And how much is that in revenue?
It was $286,000 in revenue.
$286,000, and you've paid $748,000 in damages to bears, grizzly and black bears.
Grizzly bears was yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
Any follow-up?
Not right now.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Eklund, or Representative Eklund.
So I can do a little history on it, as that wouldn't be in a question form, but it might answer what Representative Provenza was getting at. I used to hunt elk it would be in the early 70s. Well, actually in 60s, I guess. And the bear license came with the elk license. Now, at the last of that license, there were only 200 bears harvested, whereas now there's 660 bears. And I'm thinking maybe that's because when we hunted elk, the bears were hibernating. We didn't see much of a bear. I never saw a bear. I saw a few tracks, but that was about it. I had another, the suggested amendment on page 4. A question I've got right now, we have a quota, and it seems like probably a pretty good deal if you can increase the hunter success from 200 bears to 600 bears, I think 660 bears. So that quota system has been pretty effective, and maybe we don't want to mess too much with it. In this 21 to 23 on page 4, Romanet II, you said as commission regulation, would that be referring to the quota and leave that in place through your amendment? I'm curious.
Mr. Chairman?
We do that.
Yes, go ahead.
Representative Eklund. So under Commission Regulation, Chapter 3, it has direction for registering a bear and meeting quotas. And so in the bill, since it's referring to reporting your bear harvest anyway, it would be easiest to just refer them to the regulation and have them do it in that way.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you very much for being here, and yes, Mr. Schmidt, or Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little follow-up in that question I asked last time. Do you have any idea what the costs are for the department to manage all of these conflicts? Time, vehicles, equipment? Any idea on that kind of a number?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
And Representative Schmidt. So investigations on damages are about 37,000. And then we spend for damage prevention. So we provide products to try and reduce it, like food storage and those things. We spend about 160,000 on that.
Okay, so another couple $100,000 then, roughly. Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on, the depredation charges that you pay out and stuff like that. Are there any federal dollars that come back and help you on, is it Grizzly or anything like that?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Davis, there's not, that I'm tracking. We do get some reimbursement, Section 6 funds that help us, but we generally will have temporary personnel that'll help go out and investigate, and we'll also spend some of those funds on monitoring. But the actual payments, that's all on us, as far as I know. I concur.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, gentlemen. Are there any other agencies out there that would care to comment on this bill? How about Representative Weber? Would you care to comment on this? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Winter and rest of the committee members. My name is Nina Weber. I'm representative for House District 24 in Cody. And I would urge your support on this bill. I'm totally in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to public comment. You'd come forward and good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Members of the committee, Jess Johnson with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and I've really enjoyed listening to the kind of questions and discussions that have come before. I think they're thoughtful and you're really going through the details. What we did and what I did when this bill first came in front of us is sort of go through why. Why do we need this? Hearing about making that point to grizzly bear delisting, we need to get them in the state's hands. I'm in full agreement of that. We've spent most of our time at Wyoming Wildlife Federation working to get this bear delisted. I think I appreciate the sentiment of trying to do that, but what I can tell you, after the 10 years of working on this right now, this is not how you go about it. This is sending the wrong message. I think it's a powerful one, but it's powerfully in the wrong direction. Certainly it sets a precedent, but it also sets a precedent that we as a state legislature, or you as a state legislature, do not trust our department to do the work on the ground and do it well. Even if you have some of the commission authority, what you're saying is you're taking away their ability to manage stuff on the ground and make the decisions in an elastic way that is needed when we are managing wildlife, especially when we're looking at delisting and what comes with that. The other side of that is this is exactly what all of the groups that are trying to keep the bear listed look for in litigation. When this goes to the courts, because it will, this is going to be another thing that they can say, see, Wyoming, they want to keep doing this, and it doesn't look good. So what we're trying to do is say, with the North American model, with the decision of wildlife being at the state agencies' side, you guys are amazing at letting our department do their job. Please keep letting them do their job. This is not a bill that we can support in that sense. The other side of this is you see this in Montana. I think it was 2 years ago, the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wrote a letter to Montana as the Montana state legislature was putting a bill similar to this, but with wolves through. The Fish and Wildlife Service wrote a letter that was essentially a cease and desist. It said, you keep doing this at the state level, we'll relist the wolf. This is the behavior we can't show them. We are better than that. I think I really understand the frustration here. We feel it, man, we set out a thing when the delisting decision came down. We're mad. We don't like it. We're fighting it. But this is not the way to do it. I think the other side of this that I really want to hammer on is that we allow our agency to do the work, because if we don't, it becomes ballot box biology. We really criticized Colorado for their mountain lion ban that they mountain lion hunting ban that they tried to push through, because it was public push through. It was not the scientist. It was not the science being recognized. So again, we sat here and we listened to our two representatives from the department, or the deputy director from the department, and we listened to them talk about how in-depth our program is, how the public process listens to the public when we have issues. A couple years ago, they do bear management in sort of 3-year increments. It's incredibly elastic, meaning that they're responsive to when things come up. And in the middle of that sort of 3-year thing, an issue came up, and they wanted to raise sort of quotas around bears or how we were going to do that. So the public came and the public talked to them, and they were able to go back to the drawing board and come back with a different management side. They are able to do that, and they're really, really responsive to how the public does it. So they put the science forward, and then they take all of the hunters and they listen to them, and they turn that out in what we see in our seasons and our quotas. I think the other thing, and we touched on it a little bit, and you guys are talking about what is the cost benefit to this? Maybe we're gonna be killing bears that we don't have to pay damages on. But again, I think that point is sort of a hard one to make, because a lot of the times those bears that we're dealing with in damage situations are not in hunting seasons. They're out of hunting seasons, and we're still having to deal with that. There's always very specific bears. Usually the ones that you're seeing when you're elk hunting are not the bears that are the problem. It is the bears that are down in the agriculture, down and close to town. The other side of this is when we have a fiscal impact to the department, say $300,000 or around that, that doesn't just come out of the damages program. That comes out of all programs. That comes out of the program that we do to work on mule deer habitat and to work on everything around mule deer. So that's actually pulling funding from mule deer. And I think the last point that I want to make is that I really appreciated, Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, your point about there's a lot of other things facing mule deer, and it's not carnivores that are the problem. It is connected habitat, it's drought, it's all of these other large-scale problems. And this is a distraction from addressing the actual problem, which is much bigger and much harder. But it's a little bit of a distraction when we say just go kill one of the carnivores to save mule deer, because it's really not that big, 4.1%, 5.7%, that's not going to save mule deer. But if we can turn around and put all of this attention on habitat and connected work, rather than getting distracted with this kind of thing, I think we're really going to see a benefit to our deer. So with that, I'll stand for questions. I just wanted to say as an overarching bit, I think this harms our argument for grizzly bear delisting rather than helps.
Representative Eklund.
Mr. Chairman. So a couple of things in your argument. Montana had wolves that were delisted, and that's a threat to relist them. These are grizzly bears that are listed, and I just don't see that the government has a threat there. There's part of the argument that I don't agree with. The other part I'd bring, so you've been working for 10 years, frustrated with everything you can do. This is a little bit different, and I'm willing to try it. This thing has gone on long enough, and I think maybe the threat by the state might be reversed to help get these things delisted. I wish it was all about grizzly bears in this bill and not black bears, because that complicates things a bit. But what do you say about that argument? 10 years of frustration and never getting anywhere, and why is this a greater threat than the listed grizzly bear already is?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Representative, part of that is that when Montana and Idaho delisted and Wyoming was hung up in the courts for 5 years because of some of this behavior. And it didn't help our argument, it hurt it. And what we ended up with, and I think what we came down to, what I'll stand by, is Wyoming does have the gold standard management of wolves now. We absolutely do it in an incredible way. I stand by everything that we have laid out and fought for and gotten to, but it actually mucked up the whole decision-making process rather than streamlined it. And I think there's a really fair thing to say that the state, when people say they have a problem with the states having management of grizzly bears, whether you hear that at the court level, litigation through advocates. It's very rare that they're talking about our state agencies. The problem that they have is with the legislative decisions that a lot of states have made to sort of come in over the top of the agencies and change what that behavior at the agency level is. So that it's putting us in a really, really complicated position, and it's putting the department in a really complicated position, because you have people that have worked really hard on tri-state memorandum agreements with 3 other states. So Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming have an agreement on how grizzly bears should be managed. This is in direct violation of that. This goes way outside of that. And we're working with other states to make sure that this happens. And we're more powerful together in this, because it is a fight. And I truly agree with you. It's frustrating. We may end up on the other side there, but I'm with you on we need to get those delisted.
Okay. Thank you. Do you gentlemen have any comments? Yes. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys for being here. Listen, I probably have more of a statement than a question. I think what we're feeling and seeing, because there's other bills coming forth about our apex predators. And sportsmen are tapped out. They're very frustrated because apex predators have almost been elevated. Well, no, not almost. They have been elevated to a celebrity status in the state. And they're getting harder and harder to manage. And people are frustrated. And that's really what I think a lot of these bills are about, is to bring that back to the surface. We've got a new federal administration coming in that's going to be more friendly to getting these kind of animals delisted and managed at a more proactive rate. And I think that's what we're feeling and seeing. And that's really what's driving a lot of this. And I, for one, think the timing is good because of that fact. So that's really all I had to say. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions from the committee? Would you gentlemen care to respond?
Chairman, thank you. My name is Randy Burtis. I'm from the Bowhunters of Wyoming. I thank you for the honor for being here today. The timing is interesting. 50 years ago, Bowhunters of Wyoming started, and 40 years ago, Bowhunters of Wyoming was a significant part of getting the bear coupon removed from the elk license. And they did that in favor of quality management. And you heard the department talk about that a little bit. I have to agree with the frustration. We all have it. We all want to see our mule deer come back. I want to hunt a grizzly bear more than anybody. I'm positive of that. But I do not want to do that at the risk of federal prosecution, the loss of my security clearance, and the loss of my job, and having to live in Wyoming for the rest of my life. I love Wyoming. I'm not planning to leave. But the Lacey Act is a pretty serious thing. This is just one of 3 bills coming forward that seek to dismantle the quality management of large carnivores. We want to send a message. We want to send a message to the federal government that we can and will and should be managing our grizzly bears. I think the message that we're probably sending folks is that we can and are planning to deregulate and dismantle the plans we have for managing our large carnivores. In the mule deer meetings the department has had over the last couple of years, mountain lions were a pretty big topic. And I think the department's looking to do that. They are capable, they are willing to work with us and work towards solution for large predators, but it's not the only thing that we have to do for our mule deer. This bill is a time machine. That's basically what it is. We could probably patent it as one. It takes us backwards to 1987, and it's not a great idea. I think it really truly puts our credibility as a state to manage large carnivores in question, along with other bills that you're going to see very soon. We cannot usurp the authority to manage from those who live and breathe the science of these animals every single day to a body which can only make adjustments every 2 years through a pretty laborious process. Right? It's laborious on purpose, but it is a process. Furthermore, it seems somewhat irresponsible to condone federal crime as a legislature. You have a department that is charged by law to manage our wildlife. I beg you, please do not remove that from them.
Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for the panel. I understand the management that needs to be done from our Game and Fish Department. But I also understand that there's a lot of pressure from special interest groups that are factored into that management practice and policies that they develop because of the pressure that comes. I feel terrible for our Game and Fish Department to be in that position. It's a tough spot. You know, I've always had to chuckle when I hear about our grizzly bear management plan, because I don't believe it's a management plan. It's a monitoring plan. Our guys and gals get to do the dirty work when it comes to the grizzly bears. That's what it amounts to. So I do have a soft spot there for our department because they are in a tough spot. But a lot of these policies and practices, I do believe they have to factor in the pressure from these special interest groups and how they manage our predators, our big game animals, every critter that they look after. So that is part of the problem. And I wish they could just manage the animals and conserve the wildlife and serve the people. That's really what they need to be doing, and push all these special interest groups to the side and focus on that. So, thank you.
Do you have any response?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Schmidt, I do agree with you. I think there are times when the legislature can step in and take some heat off of the department so that they can do their jobs more effectively. There are times that they can do that. I'm not certain this is one of those times, but we probably should look for more opportunities to help them in that way. But it shouldn't directly affect management of wildlife.
Do you have any comments?
Chairman, members of the committee, Josh Metten, Wyoming Field Manager for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. Definitely want to echo comments of my colleagues here. And I think one particular area that I just wanted to share some personal experience in is I've had the pleasure of being able to volunteer with the Monteith Shop and the amazing research that they're doing in Wyoming on bighorn sheep. I've gotten to go into the Wyoming range and gotten to catch newborn deer fawns. The purpose of that study was to put collars on those fawns and track their survival and identify how they live, what they need, where they migrate, how much predation is going on. And I just want to defend the amazing work that that shop is doing, and is something that we should be very proud of as a state, that shop is based right over the hill in Laramie, Wyoming. They put countless hours, the biologists that are on that team put countless hours on the ground, boots on the ground. They get emails in the middle of the night and go out to check for mortality. They're doing amazing research, and that research is what should be guiding our management of wildlife. And that they coordinate directly with the Game and Fish Department. That's why the TRCP was active in Colorado in fighting the ballot box biology of the mountain lion hunting ban. And that's why I'm sitting here today asking you to please don't support this bill. Like, we have a legacy in this country of science-based wildlife management that is for the people of the state, because wildlife are held in trust by the people of the state. When the legislature gets involved in mandating wildlife management, when the general public gets involved in wildlife management, that's no different than like some random citizen telling you as a landowner, as a rancher, how you should manage your land. Like, you're the experts on your property. Like, you should be able to manage your livestock, your property. The Game and Fish Department, the biologists that they work with should be the ones making these decisions. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Could you give your name again, please, and who you represent?
Josh Metten, Wyoming Field Manager for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the folks here? Yes, Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello. I am just wondering, you guys represent different entities. Are you registered lobbyists? Or you are, all three of you? Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have and you guys may not be the right people to ask, but it might be more of a department question. Do we know how many lives have been lost to grizzly bears in the last 20, 25 years? Any idea?
That is one I would ask the department. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, I thought so. Thanks.
Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In addition to being lobbyists, are you all active sportsmen and hunters in the state of Wyoming?
Go ahead.
Yes, also bear hunters.
Yes. Love hunting in the Wyoming range. Love our deer herds. Looking forward to working on efforts to recover our populations.
Well, thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, Representative Schmidt again.
Never mind, Mr. Chairman. It's already been answered.
No, thank you. Is there any more public comment? Representative Tarver, do you have any comments to make about this? Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman and committee. This bill, unfortunately, it's unfortunate that this bill had to come forward. But this is landowners that are frustrated. They've been waiting for the professionals to fix the problem. When is the problem going to get fixed? And if we're waiting on the federal government to fix our problems, we might be waiting a while. This has nothing to do with this bill, but so we're waiting for a place to store our nuclear waste. They've been working on it since 1982. They still don't know where we're going to put it. Is this a similar problem? And it's just very frustrating. I understand why the bill is in front of us. I understand the professionals probably have the answers to fix some of these problems. But I think Representative Schmidt made a very valid point. They're getting torn in two. And so a bill like this is kind of a nudge, in my opinion. Would we rather the game and fish take care of the problem? Yeah, I think we would all rather they just solve the problem, but how many years do we wait? 20 years? When do we decide that the state of Wyoming has sovereignty and the federal government doesn't? I mean, am I gonna be alive when that decision comes out or? So this bill has a purpose, and I think it is a purpose of pushing back against the federal government. We have an administration now that I would disagree with some of the previous testimony. I think this is the time for this legislation. Do I think this is a perfect bill to fix all the problems? No. But it certainly shoots an arrow across the bow. I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions for Representative Tarver? Seeing none, thank you very much for your being here. Okay, I believe we have comments from the Zoom participants. Is that correct?
Joe is first. I can't say his last name.
Is this for Mr. Condelis? Yes, welcome. If you can get online, would you state your name and who you represent? We can't hear you yet.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman,
members of the committee. I apologize. I'm working and trying to do this on my cell phone. My name is Joe Condilas. I'm the president of the American Bear Foundation. Our organization is a bear hunting, bear conservation organization, and all of our members across the United States and Canada are bear hunters. We oppose this bill just on the merit of black bears being over-harvested in the state of Wyoming and the potential for that. Contrary to what a lot of people think, there is a lot of people that enjoy bear hunting and want to continue to be able to bear hunt and have bears on the landscape to do so. One of our platforms of founding the foundation was to delist the grizzly bear. So I totally understand the frustration. I'm frustrated as well. All our members are frustrated. I get the sentiment. This bill seems more of a shot across the bow for grizzly bears. That's fine. But I can't stand idly by and let black bears be wrapped up in the issue we have with grizzly bears in this state, because we have a remarkable resource in black bears, and I just don't want to see it go by the wayside because of grizzly bears. So yeah, with that, I'll leave any comments or questions for myself, and I appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you. Committee, do you have any questions for Mr. Condilas? Yes, Representative Ottman.
Mr. Condilas? Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Condilas, yes. I was just wondering, a brief education. When you and your organization, particularly in our state, when you do this for marketing, how do you get your license? Is the individual, do they need to apply, or does your organization get so many, or how does that work?
Oh, we're just a foundation, similar to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. We just represent bear hunters and black bears. So, we're an all volunteer organization that actually started in Wyoming. I live in Cody. And so we wanted to be a voice for bear hunters and for bears, and that's what we do. So yeah, we don't provide hunting opportunities or anything like that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Eklund.
Yes, sir. When you started dealing with the concern I have, which is throwing all of our bears together, and it looks to me like the black bears are being managed, and we're able to harvest far more than we did in the past. So I hate to mess up that program as well. Would you be interested in sorting the grizzly off by itself? Because I've got a feeling this bill might pass, and I'd like to deal with the real problem. What I think.
Yeah. Yes, Representative. At this point in time, I would like to see the black bears taken away. I think the grizzly bear is an issue that is, it's so troubling that what we're dealing with the federal government, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I mean, like I said, I want sustainable grizzly bear hunting opportunities in the state of Wyoming more than anyone. But black bears shouldn't pay for that. And we do, we've collared bears in the Wyoming range. We work with the Game and Fish, with the University of Wyoming. We've done so much work for black bears, and to prove that, they're not the only reason we're losing mule deer. And I just would hate to see another instance where black bears are, they suffer because of the grizzly bear. So I wouldn't be opposed to that, removing them from this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Condilas.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Kevin Brainerd.
Okay. Welcome, Kevin. Go ahead and introduce yourself and address the chair.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Brainerd. I am just a lifelong Wyoming resident and hunter and outdoorsman. And I'm kind of here just to speak on what I think about this. I think grizzly bears, and I'm speaking mostly to grizzly bears about this. I also hunt black bears every year. I hunt mule deer in the Wyoming range. I actually go over there every spring and hunt black bears also. Hunting grizzly bears has always been a huge idea that I wanted to do more of like a bucket list hunt, and the idea of being able to hunt them in Wyoming, it's super attractive to me. I was super excited when he listed them a couple years ago, very upset when they got put back on the list. I get all the frustration we have. I'm right there with everybody. And as hunters, I hate having to support all of the grizzly bear issues we have. That being said, I feel like this bill is more of a middle finger towards somebody and less of a bill backed by science. I think our wildlife managers, and listening to what they said, they're not really in favor of this either. And I think they know what they're doing. And I think we need to let the current administration work through this and sort of get it going, because I feel like they're gonna, especially with Representative Hageman and all the work that she is continuing to do. Couple of my issues, top of all that, is it is a federal offense, I'm aware, to shoot a grizzly bear. So this puts hunters right in the crosshairs. We're using hunters to make a point that I think could ultimately get us in trouble. And if that was the case, is somebody going to be there to help us out when we do this? I don't know. It will set back a lot of the gains, what little gains we have made as far as grizzly bear delisting and management and all that. It just gives a bad view to the groups that oppose it, and it gives them ammunition, which they will use, and they will take it to court, as was previously said. And I think it's a step backwards. I'm old enough to remember when we had the bear coupons. I remember talking to my dad about it. We'd go up and hunt the bighorns every year. Nobody was killing bears back then off those coupons, hardly at all. There's way more bears harvested now with the current management practices. Way more people are interested in hunting them. And there's another point I would like to make and refute is using black bears as a excuse for the mule deer herds over in the Wyoming range specifically. They have a very, very, very small part of that. A lot of it's habitat, drought, weather. Of course, predators do have some impact on it, especially when animals are trying to recover, but I don't think black bears can be used as a reasoning for that. Just what I've seen and read and studied and read all the studies on it. So anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate you letting me talk.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Brainerd. Are there any questions for Mr. Brainerd from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see what happens here.
Thank you again.
Luke Worthington.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Worthington.
Hi, my name is Luke Worthington, Chairman and Representatives. My name is Luke Worthington. I run the Wyoming Houndsman Association. I'm speaking on a black bear and grizzly bear deal because we're not only houndsmen. We don't get to run bears in the state, but we care about science-based wildlife management because we're not just houndsmen. We are sportsmen. We hunt deer. We hunt bears. Spot and stock bait. We're hunters. We're sportsmen. Yes, we classified as houndsmen, but we're a lot more than that. This is a prime example of ballot box biology. We are stripping the game and fish powers to manage our large carnivores to a standpoint where there is a future for them. Like we said, we're harvesting 400 bears with 5,000 tags. That's a lot. But it's up to game and fish management because they go by a pyramid of biology, social, and political. The sportsmen need a voice. And our organizations throughout Wyoming, like the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, American Bear Foundation, Wyoming Houndsman Association, we are the sportsman's voice. That's why we start these associations. And Game and Fish I believe they do a great job with our bears and our lions, and they do it through public process, public comment. Sportsmen have a voice when it comes to how Game and Fish implements hunt seasons and regulations, and that's due to the public comment period. Going straight to legislation, especially with the black bears, I get the grizzly bear thing. It's frustrating, but we're hammering black bears with this bill, and I don't believe that's right, because when Game and Fish has their season date settings and all that stuff, there's public comment. Biologists go to every region, and sportsmen have a voice because they can go to those regional meetings, speak their voice, tell them everything. Game and Fish, the biologists, they present data to the sportsmen, and then they gather all that data and go to the commission, and then they find out a management plan. As we're working right now, this is overstepping the public process to our sportsmen, and I don't agree with this bill mainly because of that. You know, the black bear, the grizzly bear deal. Now, just like the gentleman before me said, we're setting up Wyoming residents for a felony. We're giving a coupon. Who's going to back us up when we get thrown in jail? You know, that's a $10,000 fine and time in prison. So you guys are condoning, you know, a felony charge on a citizens because they're protected by the federal government. That is, you know, we can't do this. They need to be delisted right. This management needs to stay with the Game and Fish because they have the real science, real data, and they go through the public comment process, which is very important to sportsmen. Thank you for your guys' time. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Brainerd?
It's Luke Worthington, Chair.
Mr. Worthington, I'm sorry. Seeing none, thank you very much for your attendance and testimony.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the next item. What's the pleasure of the committee? Oh. Yeah. Are there any other testimonies out there? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? A motion to move the bill has been made. Do we have a second? Motion by Representative Strzok and second by Representative Schmid. Is there any discussion here in the committee? Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I do have one question, but probably should have asked it earlier. But if we do this, and the question I had with the livestock, when we take them off and change it, do the livestock producers still get reimbursed? Does that mess with that?
Gentlemen, could you respond to that, please?
It may be, I just was something I went through.
It's a different statute.
Yeah, it's a different part of law. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Strzok, yes, they stay on the list of being an animal that qualifies for reimbursement.
Okay, sorry, thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any other questions? Yes, Representative Schmid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess since you guys are back up here, I can ask the question about human fatalities caused by grizzly bears for the last 20, 25 years.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schmid, so, yes, in the last 10 years, we've had 3 people in Wyoming outside of the NPS area, the Park Service boundaries. 20 since the late 1800s, so more recent though, the 3. I'm sorry, 3 in Wyoming in the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarification, guys, I really want you to emphasize you guys are not the enemy. I've worked with you guys. I know the passion you have for this business. and for these critters. And I really do feel sorry for you in the place you're in, because you are between a rock and a hard spot. And I know you're doing your best. And so I just want you guys to know that.
Thank you, Representative Schmidt.
Thank you.
I think the whole committee feels that way, that you're greatly respected, and we thank you for all you do. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the committee? Discussion. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe I'll be a no on this bill. You know, I agree with some of the presenters up there that this is lacking maybe a little scientific data in these assumptions in this bill, and it may be just making a statement against the federal government. And as we've considered other bills amongst this board, we've looked for guarantees that we would not be from the federal government, not, you know, as far as the reintroduction of this or that. There was we wouldn't go forward unless we had a guarantee from the federal government that there was no retaliation against grazing permits and things like that. So I just I agree with some of the things in here, I know, but I'll be a no on this.
Thank you. Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I've been going back and forth on this one quite a bit because myself, I'm an avid black bear hunter. Every spring we're out there, I have a lot of friends blowing up my phone over this whole deal. But on the other hand, what we're doing with grizzlies is not working. And we need to stand tall as a state and say, hey, look, it's time that we put some pressure on. And so I'm just gonna make this as a suggested amendment to maybe get this bill forward with where we want, and maybe it can have some success going forward and still send the message we want. And so I'll bring this amendment, I move this amendment for discussion of the committee. Then on page 4, line 12, we would strike brown or black bear or, and we would leave all of this just related to grizzly bears. And I look forward to that discussion of the committee.
I would second it. I'm not sure that that'll clean up the whole thing, but we may need more cleanup to just sort these grizzlies off by themselves.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend to the bringer of the amendment that we allow for conceptual amendment for LSO. And I think they would be able to then go through and change what they need to hold the intent of removing brown or black bear.
Any other comments from the committee? Okay. Yes, Representative Eklund.
Are we gonna be operating on an amendment that's conceptual? The bringer of the amendment would have to agree to that, because his was just to strike several words here on page 4, line 12.
We'll do conceptual.
Conceptual, okay. My second's good with that too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I guess we need to have a vote on the amendment. So all those in favor of Representative Banks' amendment could you read that amendment? Do you have it?
So I'm confused because I heard that we were gonna remove brown and black bears, but then we went to a conceptual. Which are we doing?
Conceptually remove them.
So, Mr. Chairman, to clarify, the motion is to remove brown and black bears from the entire bill.
Is that correct? Okay. So are we square on it, folks? Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passed. We're back on the bill.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Representative Eklund.
as I said, I thought this bill might pass. You're in the Ag Committee that most of us represent a lot of producers with livestock, and there's a problem. And I think I'm gonna be a no on the vote regardless because of our Game and Fish and other people are working hard on this problem. I do like the concept of bringing it, bring a whole different idea. Go ahead and pass a state law and see how it works. But I just can't put our agency, the hunters can choose, but the agency maybe can't on this Lacey Act business and violation. And I realize, I mean, everybody seemed concerned with that regardless of the protections that the sponsor thought were in the bill. So I'd probably be a no vote, but I'd sure love to work with it to maybe make it work yet.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to walk the committee through something that I've been through. I think it was 2023, I sponsored a bill. I fought real hard to get it through the House. It was a bill that gave gun rights back to nonviolent felons. And we were trying really hard to make sure that we were giving people their rights back. They'd done their time. We were really proud of that legislation. We worked really hard on it. It got tons of testimony. And that bill ended up, unfortunately, the way that we restored rights put people in conflict with the federal government. As a result of that law, it's shame, you know, it's embarrassment to me and I apologize for it, but people have been arrested for having their guns because they thought under Wyoming law that they were fine, that they had their votes, they had their gun rights restored and they had firearms. And because of the nature of how the law works, they ended up in serious federal problems. And now we are working diligently to fix that legislation. This bill, I think, unfortunately poses potentially a similar problem where folks think, well, I'm following Wyoming law, I'm going to be just fine. And the reality is we can't protect the people of Wyoming when they violate federal law. And I have to suffer the consequences and, you know, the detriment that we put some of our Wyomingites in front of when we worked on that law and we didn't quite get it right. And now we're spending lots of time in committees trying to fix it. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to put that into consideration for you when we pass this. This might become something that we need to figure out how are we going to protect people from when we put them in harm's way in felony.
Thank you, Representative. Any other comments? Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably going to be a yes vote on this. Just, I'd really like to see this bill get out on the floor where every representative from every part of the state can chime in on it and give us their thoughts. So I'll probably be a yes vote on this.
Good. Thank you. Did you have anything, Representative Johnson?
I think I agree with Representative Schmidt. Mr. Chairman, yes vote, I think.
Thank you. Any other discussion on from the committee?
Question.
Question's been called for. Could we have a roll call vote?
Voting on House Bill 186 with the conceptual amendment. Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
No.
Representative Eklund.
No.
Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Ottman.
No.
Representative Provenza.
No.
Representative Schmidt.
Aye.
Representative Strock.
Aye.
Chairman Winter.
Aye.
The vote is 5-4. This bill would pass with the amendment.
It was 5-4.
5-4.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Strong, have you got an answer yet?
She manages the state fair. Had to travel.
we were gonna be, I thought we were on the docket for number
I think we have time. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead and try it.
We're gonna try if you want.
We can at least get the latest testimony and she
Yeah.
can't come back. It's tired.
Good idea.
She'll have to leave.
Our next bill is House Bill 205, and Representative Strzok is going to explain the bill for us. She's the sponsor.
Thank you, Chairman Winter. So what we have here, it's going to be really simple. I'll be really quick. So it's House Bill 205. All we're asking is to take the Wyoming State Fair and make it have its own department. We will take it out of the Ag Department. It'll free up a lot of bureaucracy in a way. It's just they'll be able to move their do their business without having to go through the Ag Department. We have issues sometimes that we'll be getting ready to have the kids do their, oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. I'm hurrying so fast here, trying to get Courtney through. But, so when you have your shows during State Fair, sometimes your judge can't be there and then they're gonna have to go through the Ag Department. That was the way it was. And this way it just takes out one step for a lot of the different issues that they have. But that pretty much sums it up. In this bill, it'll say what the responsibilities of, the duties of it, and how it's just really removing it from the Ag Department and making it their own department. So that was all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to respond?
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Winters and committee members. This is something that,
Would you state your name, please?
oh, thank you. I'm Courtney Conkle, and I'm the general manager of the Wyoming State Fair. We are currently an affiliate of the Department of Agriculture. And this is something that I'm happy to take any questions on. Of course, the Wyoming State Fair has a governing board that was established in the 2018 session that they oversee me, and my responsibilities are the day-to-day operations of the State Fair. The State Fair used to be a division of the Department of Agriculture, and when that State Fair board was formed, we became an affiliate. And so the budget of the State Fair still runs through the Department of Agriculture, but the day-to-day operations are my responsibility, and then I report to the governing board. So right now, we have a relationship with the Wyoming Department of Agriculture and Director Miyamoto, but we also have the Wyoming State Fair Board that I report to. And so we're happy to answer any questions about how we currently operate or any questions about how this bill would potentially impact the State Fair.
Okay, thank you. Does the committee have, yes, Representative Provenza?
Thank you. Could you walk me through then the fiscal note, how this changes?
So on the State Fair side, Mr. Chairman, Representative, there's no fiscal note attached to this in terms of any additional appropriations or any additional staff.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Oh, Representative Davis.
So, ma'am, Mr. Chairman, so this bill is just removing the oversight of the Ag Board, is that right?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative, right now, there's the State Fair Governing Board, that they're the decision-making authority, but the budget still runs through the 010 budget, which is the Department of Agriculture. So this would, if it were to go into effect, the State Fair Board would have its own budget.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the driving force behind this to make the separation?
Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Chairman Winters. And hopefully I have this right, but actually the Ag Department is really in favor of this also. And we can pull, I think they are here? Were they here earlier? Yeah, Doug's here. So this was something they're actually really in favor of. It just takes away one step. It's less paperwork for them also, and it was something they're in favor of.
Would Director Miyamoto care to come forward? Yes, go ahead, Representative Schmidt.
Do you foresee this, maybe this department growing? I mean, growing government? It's always a question we hear about, right?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Winter. I do not. I feel like it actually makes less government.
Thank you. Any other questions? Director Miyamoto, thank you, welcome, and go ahead with your thoughts.
Good morning, Chairman Winter, members of the committee. Doug Miyamoto with the Department of Agriculture. This is a bill that is kind of a follow-up to a long series of evolutions since the seating of the State Fair Board back in 2018. I think it was mentioned before, State Fair used to be a division of the Department of Agriculture. There's now a policy setting board that oversees the day-to-day operations of the State Fair. We still manage the budget, and then we do final approval for any payment requests that come through, just like other affiliates of the Department of Agriculture. For us, we're okay either way. Right now, the Department of Agriculture doesn't invest a significant amount of time in management of the State Fair, as our role is really limited to executing payments. And so there's a lot of the administrative functions that have transferred from the Department of Agriculture to the State Fair over the last several years. And so it's a minimal impact to the Department of Ag is how I would characterize it.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this could be addressed to all of you. So what we would be doing is just skipping that step and allowing the Fair Board to be a little more nimble in what they're doing without a whole lot of other change. And both parties, everybody's agreeable to this. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, I think that the characterization would be the State Fair Board would still have to follow the same State of Wyoming fiscal procedures in executing payments. So the same check boxes would have to be checked. It's just a matter of who has to do them. And so right now, you know, in the example of you have a livestock judge that doesn't show up and you have to execute a contract immediately in order to get somebody in that ring, you know, we used to be on the grounds and have the availability to go ahead and draft up a contract. We're not that available anymore because we don't have that same presence. They would be able to do that on their own at this point. But in terms of streamlining, we would be taking the responsibilities and authorities of the Department of Ag and transferring those over to a new entity.
Thank you. So you're good with that, Ms. Conkle?
Mr. Chairman, representatives, like Doug said, there's quite a few efficiencies that the State Fair has been able to incorporate since the Fair Board was appointed. And so this is something that I think that really, like Doug said, we're neutral.
Thank you. Does the committee have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for being here and your testimonies. Is there any other public comment? Any more agencies, I guess? Seeing none, any public comment? Representative Tarver, do you have some thoughts? Thank you. Okay, what's the?
Move the bill.
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion is to move the bill, and it's been made by Representative Eklund and seconded by Representative Banks. Do we want to have discussion? Anyone have any thoughts or concerns?
Question on the bill.
Okay. Question's been called for. Could you?
Voting on House Bill 205. Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
Aye.
Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Provenza.
Aye.
Representative Schmid.
Aye.
Representative Strock.
Aye.
Chairman Winter.
Aye.
9-0 in favor of this bill. This bill passes.
Okay, thank you. I guess this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.